Hey guys, Tim here with Two Feather Survival. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about tonight is some trap building skills that you can add to your toolkit. What we're going to be building is something called the Paiute Deadfall. Stay with me. Alright guys, well the Paiute Deadfall is a Native American trap that was utilized primarily in the West, but it's got applications in many areas of the world. And it is, in my opinion, a little bit better than what most know as a figure 4 deadfall trap. It is still within the deadfall trap category, but for a few reasons I find this one a bit easier to construct and also a bit easier to use once you get the hang of it. And there is a little bit of, I guess you could say, fine-tuning with the trap once you get started. What are we going to need tonight for our project materials? Well, you're going to need some version of a knife. If you have a folder, that'll do just fine. If you have some sort of a multi-tool, that'll also do just fine. If you have a Scout Woodsman, well, that'll work wonderful. I actually found that I really enjoyed utilizing this knife with this building project. Or if you have one of my Nesmith inspired knives, well, that's going to work just fine too, gang. So it doesn't really necessarily matter what type of knife that you utilize as long as it meets a couple criteria. Number one, is it good and sharp? Number two, if it's a folder, does it actually lock so as you're carving this won't fold back on your hands, in which this folder actually is. So it doesn't really matter what type of knife that you use, as long as it's good and sharp and it meets some basic criteria. So as long as you've got the good and sharp part down, you're really a good way to having a good knife to make this project easy for you. If you're going to use something like a Gerber multi-tool and it has a lockable straight edge for carving, or even a serrated saw for cutting the wood, well then that's also a good choice as well. There's nothing wrong with a good multi-tool. If I've got something like this in my pack, this does a whole bunch of skill sets for me all in one small tool. It's a good thing to consider. It's a good thing to keep on your belt. Something else that you're going to need. Some type of cordage. This cordage is natural jute twine. If you want to use the more natural look, then you can grab something like this, or hemp cordage, or whatever it is that you have in your kit. If you have number 32 bank line, tarred bank line, or some other type of string there, well, that's fine as well. Or if you want to go out and find yourself some plants to make some natural cordage with, you can go ahead and knock yourselves out. That's also a great way to do that, and is a good skill set that you should try to develop and make sure that you understand what type of natural fibers you can utilize to make cordage. If I'm ever caught out in the woods with just this as my one option and my one go-to, and I don't have any type of cordage with me, well then that's a skill set that I need to definitely spend some time in knowing. Now, Paiute Deadfall basically consists of 3 sticks. We have here is a base stick. I'll show you the cuts here a bit closer in just a second after I explain it. I have a stick that's a bit wider than my thumb. Good quality stick. It's fairly still on the green side. I have my top piece, which is going to act as my lever, which is where my deadfall is actually going to be secured from. Next piece I have is a little bit of cordage that would come down to this small guy here, which is our trigger stick. This stick actually wraps around the back, locks in over the top of our string, and you can slide this down to fine-tune this trap. So basically what you're going to have is something that looks like that. And the fourth piece of this equation is our bait stick. And our bait stick would simply lock in here and then go out to whatever it is that we're choosing to use as a deadfall. A large piece of fallen timber, or more preferably some large rock that is at least equal in size or greater than the prey that we're trying to hunt. So that's kind of what this looks like as you put all this together, and I'll show you this a little bit closer here in just a second. Alright guys, well, we've got our tabletop discussion going on here. Here's a bit closer shot of the items that you're going to need to fabricate. We'll talk about each one of these. I'll try to lay them out in order here for you. Stick number 1, stick number 2, our trigger, our piece of cordage, and then our bait stick that's here. Alright, so each one of these actually serves as a pretty good function, and I'll show you kind of what this looks like all set up here in just a second or two. This is our bottom stick, what you're going to need to do is cut a stick depending on how high you want your trap to be, so this length really doesn't matter. This is something that you're going to tune. You're going to kind of point this stick on both sides, and I actually cleave some of this off, and I'll talk about that here in a second. So as what I've got is another angle notch coming in and then a cut back out, and broke some of that off. But this piece is going to be the part that makes contact with the ground, and then is going to allow your top brace stick to set in there kind of this way and kind of have a balance point here, or a hinge point maybe is a better way to describe that. So this part would stand up vertical from the ground, and this part would then balance in on top of that. Like I said, I'll show you all this working here in a second. Here's our next stick. So this piece here is going to have an angle cut into it. So just come in at a 45-degree angle, cut that wood out, and then come back in on the other 45-degree angle, cut that other side out. Now the thing with this part of the device is you're going to need to fine-tune this depending on what type of wood you're working with and also what you're utilizing as your crushing weight. This stick's length will also depend on that simple fact of what it is that we're trying to hunt, what it is that we're looking for. The other cut that you need to make here is basically a simple round notch, go all the way around the diameter of this, and then channel that back out into a shallow V. This will give you a fastening point, and then just with a square knot or a clove hitch or whatever type of knot you want to utilize, you're going to tie your cordage back to this. So that's part number 2. Part number 3 is a little bit more tricky. This is our triggering device. A couple cuts that you want to make on this. I first of all took and shaved down flat on 2 sides. That will help to lock back in on the cordage and make sure that the trigger doesn't go off prematurely. And the other notch that you're going to want to make is another channel notch around most of the circumference. Be careful about going too deep. If you go too deep, this will actually act as a fail point, and where the string is pulling kind of broke right here in the center. So make sure that you're paying attention to that area there as well. Make sure that your stick, your triggering stick, is not too small and also not too big. So again, this is something that you're going to have to kind of figure out as you go a little bit and fashion it. Now with the cordage, in fact, here's a piece here. You see, as I made my measurement, I actually cut too much off. It's not a whole lot. If this was cordage that I had to manufacture in the woods, however, this is a representation of a lot of time and a lot of skill and a lot of craftsmanship. Since this is natural jute twine, where this little short piece would go, if I can utilize it in another trap, I'm going to utilize that. If I can't, this goes straight into my fire kit. The natural jute cordage is a great tinder. Don't simply discard any type of twine that you might find left over after a construction project. Save, save, save. Remember to keep in mind that possum mentality. Enough of that for now. Final equation is this little guy here. This is your bait stick. This is going to be the stick that I would put my bait on, either by tying or lashing, or make sure that it's at the utmost point when we put all this together, and I'll show you that as we're here. I want my creature to have to climb up on this, use this as a perch to then get to the bait, which would cause this to fall, which then sets off my trigger and the rest of the chain of events with the trap. So I'm going to show you this in action, and I'm going to move the camera, and I'm going to hope that I don't break my fingers, guys. Just kidding. Careful with these type of traps, all kidding aside, folks. If the weight is enough to crush a small animal, then it's definitely enough to crush fingers. That we don't want to do. If I take a mechanical injury to my hands, now I'm out of the picture totally. Alright guys, well here's kind of the Paiute all set up. It's ready to trigger. It's pretty much ready to go. I've got about a 30-pound crushing weight above that there, and it's one of the paver stones here in the backyard, so had to get kind of creative. Let me kind of give you an idea of what's all here. So here is our load-bearing string. This takes the load from here at the top. We have a fulcrum point that starts here, fulcrums out here, and comes out to here, where we then transfer that load down to our triggering stick. Our bait stick is this other piece that's coming up, and that's where we would want to bait either the stick or just above it up in here, so our animal has to climb up to that. Now, depending on how much weight and where we want this to fall, that triggering stick can be different sizes, shapes and dimensions. You can make them fairly small, and that will change the whole dynamic of all of this. A couple things that I found out, and I'll try to pull in for a tighter shot here in a second. This stick here, the triggering stick, actually wants to rock to the left and to the right. If I allow that to kind of come here to the end and press up, that gives me more of a downward force on that stick. That downward force is what I want for when my animal comes up to mess with this. We get a good crushing force action and the trap falls to the ground. The other thing that you want to look for, make sure that your sticks come to the outside of the trap. If you find that they're consistently going in, that can give a space for the animal to actually come out depending on the size. So I want to make sure that I'm in as deep as I need to be, but not all the way in with the vertical shaft being underneath the crushing weight, because then when this falls, this gives me a space. So that vertical shaft, I want to make sure that it's just on the outside of the trap to make sure that everything works well. I'll set this back up for you and kind of explain what it is that we're doing here as we go. I need to just move the camera to do that. Alright guys, well, to give you kind of a little bit better view here, again, we've got our support stick here. We have our bait stick that runs up here, and you notice the farther I get this back in underneath our crushing force weight, the better off this is going to be. Here we see our fulcrum point, our triggering stick, which is here. Notice too that the cordage comes underneath and that wraps around the back of that stick and then comes back out from there. Now, when an animal comes in and triggers this off, all of the support sticks come up and they're all clearly away from that crushing weight. Now, keep in mind the other stick that was there was just my pointer stick. So with these away and out away from that, all of this weight comes down onto our prey. So we'll go ahead and reset this. That way you get an idea of kind of how this all works. We'll take that back out. Grab these two pieces here. Bring our weight down. Let that just kind of balance on that. Come around the back side. And lock that in. Now, as I start to let this come onto the triggering device, all of the weight will now be supported on our fulcrum and on our string. Now, with my bait stick, I allow this, and this is the part I was talking to you before. This piece wants to kind of ride up. I want to let that ride up a little bit, and I'll allow my bait stick to just simply lock all that in. I don't ever want to put my hands underneath this until I'm sure that I've actually got all of this working correctly.
because if that weight is strong enough to kill a small animal, well, it is also strong enough to do some serious damage to my hand. That I do not want to have happen. Take this around just a little bit here. There we have it, folks. The Paiute Deadfall Trap. This is something that you can put together, throw in your haversack, throw in your backpack, and then have these available to you when it is time for you to get to an area that you want to try to hunt. If I make 6 or 7 of these, or 8, now I've got 8 people working for me to help gather food as long as I'm in an appropriate area that I can hunt with.
Well guys, I hope you've enjoyed our brief discussion on Paiute deadfalls and how to apply them, and kind of some of the finer carving tasks that you can do to make it a bit better for you, so you can utilize it in your bag of knowledge and skills that nobody can take from you because it's in your brain. That's all I got time for today, friends. I hope you have enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. Paiute deadfalls. Learn how to make them, learn how to apply them, and practice with them before you need to use them. See you next time, guys.